We are really very lucky that Jason is still in town. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring to the stage Mr. Jason Reitman.
Hey, guys. You sound particularly up after that ending. You know, I want to introduce someone that's very important to me and very important to this film. This was a movie that was produced and financed by a Canadian company named Braun. Yeah. They financed and produced both this film and Tully, two films that, are not easy films to get made. They're the films that are very hard to get made, and they are exactly the kind of films that I want to make, and they wouldn't be possible without our producer, Aaron Gilbert.
Terrific. Nice to meet you, Aaron. Pleasure. We'll come to you guys for some questions in a minute. I'll start with a few myself, and so get ready for the questions. And try and be brief when you pose your questions, and we'll go from there, okay? Jason, let's just maybe start with the cast. One of the things that I love about your films, they always have this amazing cast. Many of the people you've worked before with, some of them new. Talk a little bit about Hugh, Vera, and J.K., everyone that you've brought forward on this film.
Well, yeah, this is the largest ensemble that I've ever worked with. And it was exciting in that even in the smaller roles, there's a lot of actors who I've just wanted to work with for years. Actors Alfred Molina, or even Kevin Pollak, or even a comedian like Bill Burr. I'm not sure if you guys are Bill Burr fans at all, but this was this kind of opportunity. We were casting so many characters that I got to go deep. But at the lead of it, we need someone to play Gary Hart. And this is a very complicated role to fill because you just watched the movie. As you could see after seeing it, this is not a traditional biopic. This is not a film where you follow the main character. This is a movie where you're following everybody else. You're following the people at the Washington Post, the people at the Miami Herald, the people even on the campaign office who are trying to do the right thing in the midst of a scandal when the world is shifting under your feet. And at the center of it is this enigma, a man that is brilliant but also clearly flawed and made mistakes. And to this day, the people who love him don't know him completely. And in this role, we needed an actor who obviously Hugh Jackman is a guy whose heart beats out of his chest, and that's why he moves us in roles like The Greatest Showman and Logan. And in this movie, he needed to do something completely different. He needed to play an actor a character that we desperately want to know and understand, and he brings us all the way to the edge, but never lets us completely in. And I just thought he was magnificent, and it was an amazing thing to watch in real time. Yeah.
The style of the film, too. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that. It was very particular. Why those choices?
Well, it's our writers, my co-writers are going to be here any moment. I know they're on the way.
Which is why I keep looking into the wings.
But this is an unusual script in that it was co-written by three people. One is the guy who wrote the book on Hart. He's a journalist who's at the New York Times, covered 5 presidencies. His name is Matt Bai. And the other guy is a guy named J.K. Simmons, who was the press secretary for Howard Dean, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, went on to write on House of Cards. So this was a movie that was kind of written from the perspective of the people who have actually been on the ground, and that was very important to us. And there they are. Matt Bai, J.K. Simmons.
Sorry.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry.
And we wanted the film. Look, this is a movie that is constantly asking you as an audience what is important and what is relevant, right? I mean, this is kind of the biggest question of the movie, and it's the question that we think about the most these days. What flaws are we willing to put up with in our leaders? And this is the question that was facing the journalists at the time, And this is a question that is facing journalists even more today. And so cinematically, we wanted to do something similar. We wanted to present a film where you as an audience were constantly trying to listen to 3 different things at once, see 3 different things at once. You're in a room that is alive and the camera is floating through, and the most important conversation be happening in the background while something innocuous isn't happening in the foreground. Perhaps in the foreground, you're in the airport and they're arguing over the wardrobe now on the news, and in the background you see Gary Hart, with who's grabbing a cell phone and you can't even hear the conversation. Or you're in a campaign office and they're talking about what time the bars close, and you happen to notice this conversation with a young woman who's being asked for coffee, and J.K. is being told she's not the one who gets the coffee. So we wanted to stylistically take this approach that matched the more important question of what is relevant.
You mentioned journalism and journalists. The film has a particular point of view on them. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Maybe with Matt and Jay as well, too.
It's funny. I don't know that I don't feel like there's a particular point of view. I mean, just to be clear about it, because people want. I'm a working journalist, right? I write a column every week. Still, I spent 11 years at the New York Times. Started as a city desk reporter. The Boston. My wife's been in TV journalism for 20 years. My friends are in journalism. I live in Washington. So the idea, there's definitely not a contempt or let alone a judgment about journalism here. I think what there is a sense, Jay and I go back several presidential campaigns. He as a political operative, me as a journalist, and I think our feeling is, the system isn't working. I mean, I don't know. I would ask you, many of you here are probably American or followers of American politics. Do you think the system is working? So, I mean, the system isn't working, and the question is, there's a lot of blame to go around. There's a lot of contribution to that. There's a contribution of operatives, a lot of contribution. There's a contribution of voters and consumers, like Jason, and there's a contribution from us in journalism, and we're not exempt from reflecting on those decisions. So I think we portray a lot of very complex dilemma that journalists went through in that moment, and I don't know where I would have been on that. I've certainly made decisions I regret and decisions I'm proud of. But I think what we're asking is for everybody to think about, argue about, talk about, reflect on decisions and consequences.
We were drawn to this story for 2 reasons. One, we just thought it was a riveting story that took place over a really tight period of time, and just watching this crushing place where we saw people. That was the other reason we were drawn to it. It's a deeply human story, and so where other people see journalists and operatives and candidate and wife, we saw human beings, because we have been those human beings in those situations, trying to grapple with really difficult choices where there's no right choice. It's often just the lesser of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 evils. And so trying to see people in that and see what that looks like is how we approach the movie. And we hope that came through, where you see journalists maybe make the right decision here and the wrong decision next, but that's a human being who's making those decisions. That operative is a human being who's making those decisions. That candidate is a human being who's making those decisions. And they had never been there before. Thank you. But they had never been there before because everything shifted in this week in 1987.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, right in the very back.
The
question.
It's
a terrific question.
God, that is such a good question.
Let me ask up top. Can you hear?
Sure.
Okay, you go ahead.
Sorry?
The question is about morality. Go ahead. The question.
The question was, do you think a candidate without morality has an advantage?
It's a one-word answer.
And it's something very interesting kind of came to all of us as we were making this movie. I'll substitute the word morality for a second. I think a candidate with no shame has an advantage. And we work in, thanks. And that's why I'm right. No. What I've noticed is that this system, you just said that the system is broken. And when I think about the elements of the system that are broken, that is something that occurs to kind of all of us. That someone who experiences shame drops out of the process. Someone who does not experience shame simply continues to rise to the top. And that is a very scary idea.
Well,
Because of this, our belief is because of what happened in 1988, we did keep a lot of really good people out of the process. They took a look at this and they said, I mean, I took a look at this and I said, I do not want to subject myself to that. It's not that all good people were kept out. We don't want to overstate that, but a lot of good people stayed away from the process because they said, I don't think that I can pull that off. I don't think that I can approach this in a shameless way or put that, or put my beliefs and my shame to the side while I try to navigate this incredibly crazy and only getting crazier by the day system. So,
yeah, and look, and Gary Hart made questionable choices. I don't think we want to say anything otherwise. And this is a movie where one person in one seat of this audience is going to experience something completely different from the person next to him. I think when you ask the question, you know, should we know what happens in a candidate or president's bedroom, one person will say, nah, that's irrelevant. And the next person is going to say, you know what, if you want to run for president, I should be able to know every single thing about you and nothing should be hidden. And what we wanted to do was make a movie where we really asked that question to the audience and present it in a way so you can have that conversation.
Okay, here.
Did you consult Gary Hart about this movie?
The question is if Gary Hart was consulted on the film.
Yeah, I mean, this goes, first, Matt Bai wrote a book about all of this. So Matt Bai first interviewed Gary Hart, the entire campaign team, the journalists, and I spoke and met Gary Hart and met the campaign team, spoke and met Donna, and they've seen the film as well. Those were the scariest screenings of my life.
Tell us about that.
Donna was the first person to see the film, and Donna was on my mind almost the most throughout the making of this film. She was a young woman who was very bright and had her life really just ripped out of her hands, and has been treated as an object for decades. And I think that's something that, Matt did a very good job of doing well by her in his book, and we wanted to do the same in the movie, and I think that's where the choice of introducing her halfway through came, was we know there's an expectation that Donna is going to be this girl on a boat, and we instead said, no, we're going to introduce you to Donna as the human being whose life was broken. We're going to introduce you to her right at that moment. And it's funny, so we showed them the movie, and I expected them to say, well, this was a very emotional experience for me. And we forget that they come in as a movie fan first. So their first thoughts were, that's a good movie. It was interesting how you shot that, and that actor was very good. But in the end, what Donna said was that she thought what Hugh did was incredible, and she was very moved by Sarah's performance, and she thought there was a real decency to Sarah's performance and a sensitivity to it. When I showed it to Gary and Lee, we showed it to him in the morning in Denver, and it was right before we went to Telluride, and we watched the movie, and then we all went for hot chocolates together. And one of the first things Gary asked was, do I really talk like that? And Lee said, yes, darling, that's exactly how you talk.
Perfect. Yes, over there. Yes.
Mr. Reitman, you and Vera Farmiga have worked together a couple of times now, always to great effect. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you work so well together and why you make such a great team.
The question is about Vera and how she and Jason have worked together a few times already, and talk a little bit about the working relationship.
Well, she's absolutely brilliant, I'm very lucky. I get to work with brilliant actors, and brilliant actors make directors look better than they actually are. In the case of Up in the Air and this film, there's a real interesting nuance to Vera. She plays complicated women very well. And while her character in Up in the Air and this film are different, there's this connective tissue of women who see the world for what it is and are very smart about it, and are very complicated and understand that there's a lot going on and come at these situations with a lot of nuance. And I think she's one of the best actresses at doing that. And she also has this contained anger that you can feel without her saying a single thing. She's extraordinary. I hope I get to work with her many times. I know you, Aaron's worked with her many times as well.
Yes, right here in the front. So that's another thing I love about Jason's films, are the music choices that he makes. Can you talk a little bit about the music? And
Sure. So we designed this opening shot of the film, which was a real thrill for me. I had never done a shot like that. And we started playing different music against it, and there was a moment where we played the Dave Brubeck song against it, and it just suddenly, it just clicked. And there was something about piano, and there was something about hand clapping, and Rob Simonson, who also did the music for Tully, an extraordinary composer, he just started working in that mode. And I've never worked on music in the way that he did on this film, where we would do sessions where he would bring in drummers and try abstract ideas, and he would just, you know, stay late in the studio just playing different kind of piano ideas. Sorry?
Finding sound.
Yeah, it was a lot more about finding sound than melody. And this was a thriller. It's my first thriller. And the idea of trying to kind of reach through people's ribs and grab their heart is something that I've never practiced. And I really relied on Rob Simonson's ability to do that. Yeah, he did do a good job. Thank you. I'll tell him.
One last question we have, and take the gentleman here.
I just want to say I really was struck by the camera work and just kind of the overlap in dialogue between the chaos and the preparation. I just want to ask specifically about that opening shot you talked about. Just because I was really struck by how long it was. Just when you're writing it, does it come to your mind, or when it comes to on set, how do you actually achieve this with all the background going on with all these elements to make that work?
The question is about the opening shot and all of the elements involved.
Aaron just said it was a long day, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. And it was an interesting shot in that we set up this whole shot, but we were doing it at a busy street corner, and we set up all the equipment, and then rush hour happened. We had to take all the equipment out of the street, and then put it all back, and then nail the shot. Look, I think it speaks to a couple things. One, something I said earlier, which is, as an idea, we wanted to present the audience with many things at the same time throughout the film and give you the choice, what do you want to look at? That goes all the way to the closing shot of the movie, where two things happening on screen at the same time. You know, him giving his farewell speech on television and a marriage trying to survive a hurricane on the other side of the screen, and you're thinking, what do I want to look at, what do I want to listen to? We shot on film. It was my first film in a few where we shot on film, and that was a thrill to do again. I forgot that when you roll film, everybody knows. When you're shooting on digital, it can kind of just run and nobody cares. But when you roll the camera and you can hear it, there's an electricity that runs through the set. And it was the first film I shot on film since Up in the Air. But the most important thing was making everything feel real. And that's where I relied on these guys. And we were all on set every day. This is not a movie where, you know, the writing was done and then it was like, all right, see you guys. Every day I feel like you guys were talking to people on set.
Yeah, for those of you that aren't writers, feature writers on movies are usually just pushed to the side. And so we assumed that would be the case here just because that is like how it works in Hollywood. We emailed Jason a couple weeks before the movie and said, hey, we realize that feature writers are like furniture on a movie set, so can you give us like one day where we can come and pretend like we're important so we can show our girlfriend and wife and little kids? And he said, no, I need you guys there from beginning to the end. And first of all, that feels amazing to be a feature writer, to have your work be that respected by a director of Jason's caliber. And we hope it made the movie better, because a lot of times in scenes there would be 3 degrees of action back, and Jason said, can you go back and talk to those guys about what they would actually be saying at that time? And so you may not hear it, but the people on the phone in the background are actually phone banking voters and saying what you would say to actual voters in Iowa and New Hampshire. And Jason deserves a lot of credit for doing that and for letting us be so involved. It made it a lot of fun for us, but hopefully it made the movie better.
And that's why we're wearing Jason Reitman buttons.
I
I don't know where they came from. I don't know. I don't know how it happened, but
we tried to convince Hugh to run for Senate yesterday, and we couldn't, so now we're working on
that
Jason
today.
So.
We're going to kickstart that campaign, I think.
You heard it here first, everyone. Right. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Jay, Matt, Aaron, And our filmmaker, Jason Reitman. Thank you so much.